welcome back. We would like to apologize for that technical glitch. This is Wake Up Sierra Leone on AYV. Don't forget to send your comments and questions to AYV Sierra Leone Facebook page.
And we'll definitely find time to factor your comments into the conversation. Now, in our first segment this morning, a case has been filed against the government of Sierra Leone to overturn the country's loitering laws, which activists and lawyers claim are discriminatory and used by police to extract bribes from people and sexually abuse women.
The laws are used to target poor and vulnerable people, say critics, and to subject them to criminal sanctions for potential conduct rather than actual harm caused. Women arrested for loitering and lacking money to pay bribes have claimed they have been violently raped by police officers. Others say they have been coerced into having sex to avoid spending the night in a police cell.
Loitering has been on the statute books since the days of British rule and is punishable by up to a month's imprisonment. It is a petty offence that is defined in the Public Order Act of 1965 and the Summary Conviction Offences Ordinance of 1906. So this morning, to discuss this issue, we have Victor Idrissa Lansana, Vice Chairman, Sierra Leone Human Rights Commission, and Alfonso Bani, Executive Secretary, Human Rights Defenders Network, Sierra Leone. On Zoom, we're expecting to have Leone Thompson, lawyer representing Advocate, a civil society organization working with girls and women. Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
I'll start off with you, Victor, from the human rights perspective. The Public Order Act is 1965. This is 2022. There are definitely, it's been a couple of years, and there are definitely issues in the Public Order Act that have been raised. One is the Part 5, that luckily the President ensured that it was repealed. But as Human Rights Commission, the human rights issues, the human rights violations, as we say in current day, from the 1965 Public Order Act, as a commission, what have been your concerns?
Yes, thank you very much for having the Human Rights Commission on your program once again. You know, this is a very serious issue. The Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone has actually taken this issue very, very seriously, and we have been making advocacy around this. As a matter of fact, we had in 2020 we had an international consultative conference where we brought in several stakeholders, including our international partners, civil society organizations, government, and also we. In 2021, we were able, from that conference, we were able to develop a national action plan on petty offences. So the Commission has been doing a very many work, ensuring that we take away, we expunge, we expunge, petty offences from our law books. But then, let me set the agenda here, the tone. You know, these petty offences thing actually dates as far back as colonial days. You know, our colonial masters used to subjugate us, as Africans, because they wanted, even as far back as slavery, in fact, because they wanted the Africans to actually work for them. You know, so they didn't want, people passing from one point to the other, not working for their masters. So they had to have laws in place that will actually limit or restrict the movement of people. And so imagine from slave trade, from slavery onto colonialism, and then we are now talking about the 21st century, we are still having these laws, that date as far back, in fact, in the 1800s, and then what is so important for people to understand, or for Sierra Leone to understand, is that these are colonial masters, whether the Brits or the Portuguese or the French people. Before now they had these laws, in their law books, but for a very long time they actually expunged those laws. But those laws are still within our own law books. And
here we are in 2022. Yes. We're still having a discussion about having such laws in our books, but it comes back again to Human Rights Commission, because some of these human rights violations, especially when Advocate is bringing it up that women particularly fall victim of this with their encounter with police officers. And I know that even sometimes that commercial sex workers too fall victim of this, when they become arrested by police officers for loitering. As Human Rights Commission, these are things that one would expect you should have brought up a long time ago and, you know, start a conversation about expunging them.
Oh yes, we have brought this to the fore for a very long time. You know, the human rights issues around petty offences, you know, talk about discrimination and also the criminalization of poverty, because these laws actually affect, the implementation of these laws affects people who are downtrodden. I mean, the poor of the poorest in our society. I mean, those, commercial sex workers, those young boys who actually do not have, I mean, any place to go. They call them vagabonds, you know. So they are the ones that actually feel the brunt. You know, when we had that consultative conference that I talked about just now in 2020. We brought I mean, victims of the implementation of petty offences. You know, they testified before us that yes, indeed, you know, they have been arrested indiscriminately. For women, for instance, like you said, women have been forced into sex and so on and so forth. So it tells you that there is a very serious problem that as a country, as a state, we have to actually give it a very serious attention. We are very happy that the former Attorney General Minister of Justice, Mr. Brewer, he was there. He actually delivered the keynote address, and he actually committed government to ensuring that we get rid of these petty offences from our law books. So it's about decriminalizing or declassifying these petty offences from our law books, because if they continue to be in our law books, then definitely we'll continue to criminalize poverty, and then people who do not have, those who are really, really poor, those who do not have anywhere to go, those vagabonds, will continue to suppress them, you know, and it's very, very unfair. So the law itself is very, very unfair, and it's high time that we started thinking of actually getting rid of them. I mean, 2021, 22, these laws, like you said, 1965, 55 or 56 years ago, we still are talking about these laws. But there's one thing that we are happy about, for the Commission is happy about, although it's still, I would say, in the process. The Attorney General Minister of Justice, and also in a collaboration with the Chief Justice of the Judiciary, they have actually drafted or reviewed the Criminal Procedure Act. So in the Criminal Procedure Act,
you right there. We'll get to talk more about the commission, but let me bring in Alfonso Bani. You've been very vocal in terms of advocating for the rights of Sierra Leoneans. Loitering has been a tool used against the poor who normally trades at night. What does this law, I mean, in terms of the effect, what effect does this law have on the poor people?
Well, the effect is enormous, and I think from what Commissioner have just said, you see, when you look at the Public Order Act of 1965, it was introduced by the late Albert Magai, and it was just after independence. And just for the purpose of our viewers, last month, April 27th, we celebrated our Independence Day, 61 years of independence. That is self-governance. And the aim of that independence is for us to control our own administration, our resources and whatsoever, to control ourselves as citizens or members of the civilized community. And in 1965, Albert Magai decided to introduce the Public Order Act in order to control, in a way of, at that initial time, like maybe trying to introduce a one-party system. But it has some, challenges. He could not succeed. But at the end of the day, we have the Public Order Act of 1965 that we announced, which we are now still using as a law guiding public order offenses or whatsoever. But when you look at the Public Order Act itself, it is purely targeting people that are not well-to-do, that are not at that level of governance. And it has two aspects in the Public Order Act. It targets the poor that are not well-to-do. It targets also those that voted in their authorities or people that are governing them to even exercise their mandates to demonstrate. And so, in other words, the entire Public Order Act controls or discriminates against people that want to challenge even state authorities. Because when you go into the Public Order Act, we are happy, for at least this current government has repealed the Part 5 of the Public Order Act. But when you look at the entire Public Order Act itself, it is not civil society friendly. Because even when you go into the Public Order Act, the police will tell you that you have to give them notification, or in fact, they have to approve. But when you look at the entire Public Order Act, there is nothing that suggests you are asking for approval from the police. What is there is that you are notifying the police. If, for example, the Human Rights Defenders Network want to do a demonstration, we notify the police that we are demonstrating and we are using Obgon, Kishi Road, Sheka Civil Street, right down to Savage Square to Stadium. We have now informed the police that this is the route we are going to use. It's the responsibility of the Sierra Leone police to now inform the public to control vehicular movement of people that are walking around, and to marshal, to provide security for those people that are demonstrating. But many a time, the moment you write an information to the police notifying them about your intent to demonstrate, the next thing they will tell you, that demonstration has something to undermine the security of the state. They determine.
And why is that happening?
The simple problem is that the Public Order Act, the purpose and intent of the Public Order Act is to stifle civic space. That is the whole purpose of the Public Order Act of 1965.
And if that's the case, in 2022, do we still need the Public Order Act?
Well, in fact, we don't need it. We don't need it. This is where I think...
Do we not need it, or do we need to make amendments?
No, we don't need some aspect of the Public Order Act. But that is the area where we think it is the responsibility, because we now have what we call the Law Reforms Commission. And if the Law Reform Commission is there, this is the commission that needs to look at some of these of our laws. And the commissioner was making reference to laws. We have the Offences Against the Persons Act of 1861. It's still in our law books, and judges and magistrates are using that to give meaning to law, to hand down judgments. And so it is the responsibility of the Law Commission now to come back to say, look, these are some of our laws, but I don't think in contemporary days these provisions of these laws are applicable in the context of a civilized nation.
Whose responsibility do you think it is to champion this? And I ask because oftentimes we bring about issues of concerns that are directly related to our laws, and it's not unconnected from how archaic these laws are, considering that we've gone years without even our national constitution. We've not, sat down as a country to review and see, okay, what needs to be changed to match up to this current generation. Whose responsibility do you think it is to champion this, to ensure that all our laws across the country are updated?
Well, for us as civil society, we are playing our part, because every now and then we are raising it up while we are not discussing it. The responsibility really lies probably with our parliament and the Law Reform Commission, because they are the ones that make laws or even review law whatsoever. But the Law Reform Commission should also engage our parliament, because they have the responsibility to look at those laws and make suggestions to parliament that this law is archaic. I think we need to review or at least amend some provisions in this particular law. But the burden really lies on our parliament, because they are the ones that are promulgating laws in this country.
So let me bring you in again. Let me ask this question. Before going to ECOWAS, ECOWAS Court of Justice, did you at any point engage the government to see the reason the laws to be repealed since they've become obsolete?
Okay, I am aware that a certain set of lawyers have taken government to court. Yes. I am now representing government. I represent the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone. It is just one of the ways to actually try to address this issue. We have to ensure that we test the laws. Even our own Supreme Court, for instance, could be actually tested, because it has to do with them. Interpretation, because when you look at the Constitution of Sierra Leone, for instance, it makes, for example, room for freedom of movement, so, looking at freedom of movement in the Constitution, and also what we have in the Public Order Act of 1965, is there any contravention between the two? So, I mean, those who have gone to the Ecowas courts, fine. I mean, it's a way, like I said, it's a way of trying to address this issue. For us as a commission, Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone, we have initiated, I mean, discussions with government. We have already got now what to call the National Action Plan, you know, on addressing what we call petty offences, because the loitering that we are talking about here this morning actually forms, I mean, part of the petty offences that we are, I mean, the Human Rights Commission is actually pushing for us to either declassify it or decriminalize it, because, you know, like I said, it's discriminatory in nature, and it actually goes against people who, I mean, do not have, if you like, call them, not say, no stake in society. You know, they are so poor that they cannot make decisions on their own. And if you talk about vagabonds, for instance, you know, people who do not have a stable home, they don't have any abode. And then you say also, if you find them somewhere around PZ or Eastern Police, they will be arrested. I mean, that is a crime in itself, just by finding them there, you know, between the hours or after 6 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening and 6 o'clock in the morning. If you find them between those hours, they should be arrested because they don't have anywhere to go, you know. So that in itself is discriminatory, because we have not made, as a state, we have not made any alternative, I mean, plans for them. How do we get them out of those tables? How do we get them out of those, I mean, areas, you know, that we don't want them to be? You know, even frequenting is another example of petty offences. So we have to be very much deliberate as a state, as a country, as the people, you know, so that we have a very serious discussion about this and see how we could, I mean, get rid of and these laws. You know, Sierra Leone is a progressive nation. We have seen, I mean, Phib just mentioned the repeal of Part 5 of the Public Order Act. You know that we have also abolished the death penalty. You know, there were 4 laws involved. You know, we have been able, as a state, we have been able to ensure that we abolish them from our law books. So this is another advocacy, this is another issue that government actually has to look at, to see that, yes, it protects its citizens. You know, it's not about somebody you just find somebody around PZ, say this is the odd hours of the day or in the morning, and then you arrest that person because the person has nowhere to go. I mean, basically, he has nowhere to go. It's like somebody who's stateless. You have arrest somebody who is stateless just because he's stateless. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's very, very, very unfair. And that is why we believe that civil society groups and other people, they have to join us, the commission, to ensure that we get government to understand why they have to come on board to repeal or amend these laws. You know, the 1965 Public Order Act is a very old law. There are provisions in that act that are actually, I mean, very much, they are good. I mean, they could be very effective. I mean, generally for the control of, I mean, the conduct of man. But then we have other provisions, you know, that are really, really obsolete. We don't need them. They are useless. You know, so we have to get government to understand that they have to amend some portions of that law.
We'll come to look at you know, the relevant, so to speak, aspects of the 1965 Public Order Act that you know, are needed for this current generation. But on the Zoom line now, we have Leone Thompson, the lawyer representing Advocate, a civil society organization working with girls and women. Leone, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Leone, are you with us? Leone, can you hear me? Check if your mic is mute. I see you moving your lips, but we can't hear you. Could you check to unmute, please? Okay. While the technical team continues to work on that to bring Leone back into the...
Let me quickly ask Alfonso Bani this question. Now that the police have been feeding on this in the sense that sex workers, for example, are arrested and sexually abused for them to be released using the law, how soon can we get this law out?
Well, interestingly, I think the current government has the opportunity, because the person that introduced this law, the late Albert Magai, is also the SLPP. And these governments, they initiated this law and they have started even removing some aspects like the Part 5. So I think the SLPP has an opportunity to transform this, this whole Public Order Act of 1965 in a progressive way. So I think if what we are now discussing, they can look at it and say let's remove this aspect of in the Public Order Act, it will help, because the police are using this as an opportunity. They are not using it in a way of curbing crime. They are using it as an opportunity to oppress or to stifle other people, and even to extort from our sisters, sometimes even those that walk around to at least to generate resources out of another means. And I keep saying this sometimes when we had this discussion. I could remember the student strike in Bo, in Jala students, when they went on strike because lecturers were not giving them lectures. When we went out there to do some investigation, we met with several young girls in the discussions that they had to go out at night to give up themselves to generate resources to pay for their education. And these are some of the people that the police exploit, not even knowing that some of these people don't go there, they don't need to go there, but they wanted to educate themselves. So these are just the practical things that when you go through these things and you are in contact with these young girls, you see the pain that they are going through, and the police are adding that burden.
I mean, when such informations like this happens within the police departments, and when it gets to the head, what is being done about it?
Well, interestingly, I will give you a scenario. There was a case, I think it's in Pujo. We had this information. A lady was allegedly accused of murder, and she was arrested and detained. She was in police custody. And another police officer went in that police cell and had an affair with her. And his own colleague went on the radio and raised this issue. And it became a concern. And so the gentleman was summoned. The information reached us. I spoke to him. I discussed with him. I said, okay, we are going to protect you because at least you are a whistleblower. I spoke with the media one. We discussed with them. Later on, can you please come back and give us information? What happened? The gentleman will, in fact, never pick up our calls. He never forwarded the information. The police, he asked them, nobody could say anything about that. That is the way the issue is. So in other words, the police, whenever you have short things, what they do is to cover up. And that's a challenge.
Protect their own.
Yeah, to protect their own.
We'll come back to that. I think we've been joined by Leone again. Good morning, Leone. Are you there?
Good morning, Vivian.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Leone, let's talk about the case Advocate is making against the government. First of all, where is the case? Is it suing the government in Sierra Leone, or is it Ecowas court, and what are you suing for?
Good morning, Vivian, again, and Marina. So this case was filed against Sierra Leone at the Ecowas Community Court of Justice by our client Advocate, and it is claiming that the state has, through the laws that criminalize loitering, violated the rights of Sierra Leoneans, particularly poor Sierra Leoneans, under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and specifically the rights to freedom of movement, equality, and non-discrimination.
And I'm sure the government must have been engaged before this. What was the nature of engagement? I know you're just the legal representative, but perhaps you're aware of this. Was there any engagement between Advocate and the government before getting to that point where this needs to be a lawsuit?
This Advocate, our client, has come across and provided legal assistance to women and men, from students to traders to others who participate in the informal economy, who have been arrested for loitering while going about their business, often while they are in the course of trying to earn a daily living, for years. And this offense or these occurrences of arrests for loitering have been brought to the attention of the authorities and to the state and state officials.
How's this?
Our client, yes, go ahead, Vivian.
How is this? Is this a sort of like a class action lawsuit, or is it Advocate as an institution suing the government?
Advocate as an institution has brought this action and has brought it on behalf of Sierra Leoneans, seeking as a main relief for the court to order the state to repeal these outdated colonial era laws that have been used to infringe on people's rights.
Leone, let me ask you this question. Going to the Ecowas courts, and let's say at the end of the day, the court gives you what you're calling for, and looking at the pattern of the country not honoring judgment from the court, what is the essence then, and why not try the Supreme Court here?
Oftentimes, these cases take years in our domestic courts. And the Ecowas court has the power to hear matters involving human rights violations that have occurred within a member state, like we're alleging in this case, without having to exhaust domestic remedies. So having ratified the court's treaty, member states like Sierra Leone are bound by the court's decisions. And implementation of those decisions rest with the state. And the state does have a record in cases that we've seen go before the court of implementing those decisions.
Now, also, one might want to know, why are you so concerned with the country's loyalty and laws to a point of taking the government to the regional courts demanding that the laws are overturned?
This case focuses on the archaic loitering laws, but it is truly about the criminalization of poverty, because these laws are used disproportionately to target the poor and marginalized, especially those working in the informal economy. So as has already been discussed on our colonial era laws, and essentially, these laws deem any person who is in a place who doesn't have any visible means of subsistence and can't give a good or satisfactory account of themselves to be an idle and disorderly person. That determination is a subjective one by a police officer, and it's a subjective basis for arrest, which leaves the laws open to abuse and being enforced in an arbitrary and discriminatory manner. And because such laws are so easy to exploit, they unfortunately have been, as we're alleging in this case, against those who have little socioeconomic standing or who work in the informal economy.
I mean, in most cases, when we're looking at loitering, women and girls have been the ones bearing the bonds. But government appears to be pushing everything protecting and empowering women and girls. Should that not be based for the engagement?
Indeed, that is a basis for ensuring that as part of the government's responsibility to protect the rights of women and girls, the government also ensures that laws that have a discriminatory impact on women and girls are done away with on our law books. And that is why our client Advocate has brought this action.
All right, Leone, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for
day.
being with us, Leone.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us through that break. This is Wake Up Sierra Leone here on AYV Television and Radio. And you've been sending in your comments on our Facebook page. We'll read out a couple of your messages there. Milton Dumbuya says, this only means that we as a nation should deduce the rationale behind each and every law and expunge all of those unfair laws from our law books.
Please be reading, I can't see.
Oh, okay. Joby Bangali Jr. says, demonstration or protest, which one does the public order talk about? And Wells, are we really doing Ye Dominion Ye this morning? Ronald George Stone says, if Sierra Leone had a three-wing of government with strong institutions and roles, then maybe the police will know its boundaries when it comes to its roles and objectives. However, they're more in line with orders from above. And we all know that in the case, and we all know that's the case, and it's been a perennial problem for our laws since time immemorial. Citizens need to know their rights so that police officers can face court proceedings if they're found wanting, because too much advantage is being taken on citizens' rights. Arthur Talker says, our police need reform. Ronald George Stone again says, our legal rights institutions have to step up in educating citizens to know their human rights in freedom of expression, association, and civil rights protest, because most citizens are ignorant of their rights, and the police are using it to their advantage against citizens. Ngoro G says, human rights activists, civil societies only come around whenever someone is incarcerated, but I'm not seeing them on any sensitization campaign to the masses about rights and obligations. They only come out to impress their sponsors to give fake impression, showing they're doing their work. So sad for Mama Salon. Ngoro G from the Netherlands. Well, those are all the messages I'll read out for now. Gentlemen, your response. We'll start off with you, Victor.
Yes, somebody was asking whether what is contained in the Public Order Act in terms of protest or I don't know the other word he used.
Protest and demonstration.
Demonstration, yes. I think what we have in the Public Order Act is possession. You know, I think it's section 17 that talks about possession, and that section tells you that any person who wants to engage in a possession or wants to organize a possession should apply to the Inspector General of Police, and then that application has to be approved by subsection 2 of section 7. It tells you that if you engage in a possession that has not been well permitted or approved by the Inspector General of Police, you commit an offense. So normally we ask the question whether that provision, you know, is in contrast with in contravention with section 26 of the Constitution itself that talks about freedom of assembly and association. So these are very important issues. Yes, somebody talked about public education. That is very important, and public education is not just an event, it's an ongoing process. We continue to engage the public, I mean, through our different platforms, whether it's we use the media or we go to the communities across the country to talk to people about their rights. But those of you who are now listening this program, yes, you have your rights. Yes, it's the responsibility of right-based groups, Human Rights Commission, and so on and so forth, to actually tell you about your rights. But also, you have a responsibility. The Constitution of Sierra Leone, Section 13, is very clear that every citizen has a duty, and one of such duty is to be patriotic and nationalistic. And it's also to ensure that you assist law enforcement agencies to actually bring law and order to boost the peace and security of our states. So we accept that yes, we have rights, but then also people have to understand that we have responsibilities. So in order for us to have a better nation, all of us have to put our hands on deck to ensure that we respect rights and we do what we are required to do as the people. So for the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone, we continue to ensure that we hold government accountable for their state obligations, because that is their responsibility. You know, we know about the social contracts. It is between government and the people. Government has, enormous role to play to ensure that they provide an enabling environment for people to enjoy their rights. You know, government has the responsibility, state obligation, to protect to ensure that they fulfill and respect human rights. And of course, citizens have the responsibility to ensure that they are patriotic and nationalistic. That is the only way we can actually improve this nation.
Alfonso, what's your response to the messages?
Commission have already at least done justice to the messages. The only thing that we add, probably from a different angle, is that when you look at the Public Order Act of 1965, talking about we have to notify the police in terms of procession. And I want all of us to understand this. By September, I think we are going to do registration for elections. I've never seen a situation where people or citizens are writing to the police, notifying, asking them that I want to go and register to vote. Because it is our own civic rights. So we do it voluntarily, and we do it at any point in time. We go there and register, and we go and vote. So in other words, for me to demonstrate, because I will only demonstrate against somebody that I'm subjected to. And so if I voted you in, I have the right to go out there and demonstrate. So I don't need again to seek permission. I need to just have spontaneous demonstrations and say, no, I don't like what you are doing. So that's the only thing I want to add to what the Commissioner have just said. Because what the Public Order Act is suggesting to us, that we don't need to enjoy our civic liberty, in as much we enjoy our civic liberty in voting and election, but we don't have civic liberty to demonstrate, which is wrong.
We are already where we are with this situation that needs to be resolved, but it's not enough to just have a conversation on the media about this. Going forward beyond the media, what are your recommendations and what would be your actions in ensuring that we get to a point where we see probably a similar situation with the repeal of Part 5 of the 1965 Public Order Act? What are your recommendations and what would be your actions to get us to that situation? I'll start with you, Victor.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. So for us, the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone, advocacy is one bit of what we do, just one limb of what we do. But we are a problem-solving institution. So like I told you, answering your question, what next? We have already developed a roadmap, what we call a national action plan on the criminalization of petty offenses. So what next is to ensure that we continue to engage government, for government to ensure that they decriminalize or declassify petty offenses from our law books. The campaign for the repeal of Part 5 of the Public Order Act, it took some time, ages, for government to finally repeal it. So this is a campaign that we continue to embark on. We continue to call on government. We have our international partners who are also on board, so that at the end of the day, we are able to ensure that those petty offenses, particularly so loitering, that go against the very poor people in our society, people who do not actually have so much stake in society. We ensure that we protect them. And if you look at the Constitution itself, Section 27, it talks about non-discrimination. I mean, there should not be laws in place to discriminate against people. People should ensure, the state should ensure that it protects its people and do not actually discriminate against them. So we see petty offenses, many of the petty offenses, for instance, loitering, prostitution, laws on prostitution and other things, they are really, really discriminatory in nature. And their execution is actually very, very burdensome on the ordinary man, the man who cannot actually afford $1 a day. So the conversation going forward is to ensure that government sees reason, to actually cooperate with the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone to ensure that we decriminalize petty offenses from our law books.
Alfonso?
The way forward, probably we also need to strengthen our human rights education to make sure that people are aware, to do legal empowerment.
Right.
Because when people are aware of their own rights, they demand it. And so that could be another way forward that we are also doing. And education is an ongoing process. And so we keep going.
The Public Order Act itself, is it in entirety all just bad?
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so. You see, if you look at trespass, for instance, trespass is a provision on the Public Order Act. If you have your property now, and somebody unlawfully enters your property and starts laying claims on that property,
I'm so sorry to cut you there, Victor. We're still discussing the Public Order Act of 1965, particularly on loitering, which Advocate is now filing a case against the Sierra Leone government at the Ecowas court. Victor, before we went for the top stories, you were making a submission.
Yes. I was saying it's not all gloomy with the Public Order Act of 1965. There are some provisions that are really handy that we can still maintain, or probably just give you or amend a bit. But take for instance the law on trespass. I think it's somewhere around Section 15 of the Public Order Act. You have your property, somebody unlawfully enters your property and start doing things, laying claims on it, and so on and so forth. That is unacceptable. So it's a provision in the law that we have to maintain. We also have, say for instance, nuisance, street noise. You are sleeping, or your kids want to study, but your neighborhood, people in your neighborhood are causing noise all over the place. They don't give you rest, or they don't give you respite. So that in itself is also very unacceptable. We have to have such a law around, although it's hardly enforced. People hardly take their neighbors to court for that, but it's in our laws. You don't have to cause noise on your neighbor. Somebody may be sleeping, somebody may want to study, somebody may have some issues, And also, riotous conduct is another provision in the Public Order Act around Section 12. So these are very if you like, progressive provisions in that Public Order Act. Although, like I've said, we need to do something, particularly so with Section 17 that talks about possession. When you look at, put it together, just oppose it with Section 26 of the Constitution, you wonder whether indeed, if it's not in contravention of the Constitution, the Public Order Act.
And as we round up, the legislative arm of government, Parliament, has a very strategic role to play in all of this. How do you rope them in on the conversation to achieve this goal?
Yes, one of the arguments I've been hearing from Parliament is that it's government that brings laws, the executive that brings laws. We are only there to debate the laws and enact the laws. But there's also a provision that there can be a private member's bill. So you have to ask yourself, ask the parliamentarians, is there any individual, for the past years, parliamentarians that have actually taken private members' bill, to Parliament to ensure that they correct a particular law, a particular law that maybe society has been crying about, it's not fair, and so on and so forth. It's difficult to see the records that there has been over the years, parliamentarians who have actually tabled a private member's bill to ensure that they are able to address certain laws. And it's the primary responsibility of a parliamentarian. In other progressive jurisdictions, you see individual parliamentarians actually tabling private members' bill to ensure that they are able to correct some laws, or bring in even not just to correct laws or amend laws, but even have a new law. You are representing your constituency. You know what your constituency wants. You know what they lack. You can actually draft a law that will be able to address certain issues that the constitution actually lacks. So we want to challenge the parliamentarians that they have to think out of the box. Don't wait until the executive brings on bills to Parliament. But you yourself, you can draft. Have consultations in your constituency. Get people to assist you. Get experts. Get lawyers if you are not a lawyer, to ensure that you have a law. You draft a law that will be able to actually stand the test of time. That will be able to address many of the ills in your constituency.
Marina, this drags us to CSOs as well, because they also have a relationship.
They do.
It could also be a situation where CSOs rally around and identify an MP they can work with to bring their concerns as a private member bill to Parliament.
Yes.
So that comes back again, Alfonso, to the CSOs.
Of course, we do take up that responsibility, but many times we have been, I don't think we have really targeted a particular NP for this particular purpose, but that could be another way forward. And I think what Commissioner is saying here is that the primary responsibility of laws lies on our parliamentarians. The problem we have is that we don't have parliamentarians that are of generational thinkers, people that think far ahead. That is the challenge. And because of politics, the politics have just undermined the entire system of this country. And so that's the challenge. But we will use this opportunity to make sure that we identify key parliamentarians that we think that are always allies to human rights issues that we engage to move this process forward.
Okay. So quickly, as we round up, Bani, you are emphasizing on the fact that the laws are discriminating and only target poor people. So what do you think are some of the mechanisms that should be put in place, you know, to curtail some of those things that targets the poor people in terms of loitering?
Well, the first thing, we have to continue with our human rights education. We embark on advocacy, as a commissioner have just said. And the next thing is to bring it to Parliament to make sure that we have progressive laws. At least we should now, our laws should be more than these laws that reflect the contemporary issues that are now affecting society. And that's the next step we will be using, engaging Parliament to see the reason, to make sure that we transform our laws.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of Wake Up Sierra Leone this morning. And this is where we would end this conversation. We would just take a break.